Bob's
Cowboy Bible Bunkers. Talking Cowboys in the name of the Lord.
Bob's
Cowboy Bible Bunkers. Where Jesus wants the highest score.
Yes, he does.
From Roger to Aikman and Romo to Dak. Sturm's talking Cowboys from hell and back. Bob's Cowboy Bible Bunkers. God's favorite game.
That's right. It's Tuesday. It's that time to talk some Cowboys with our good friend Bob Sturm of the Hardline. You can read all of his fine work at the Substack. Almost called it the Sturm Stack, but it is the Sturm Stack.
It is the Sturm Stack.
So subscribe to that.
You almost called it the Athletic and forgot that they got rid of me like 6 months ago.
No, I knew you got canned by them, so don't worry about that.
Hard.
But it's always good to break things down with you on a Tuesday, and I kind of want to start with the O-line, which has been better. Obviously, it's been better since the Philadelphia game, but we're heading into the retest, or the makeup test. And there were things against the Seahawks that didn't look great, especially from Terrence Steele. And maybe it's because he had such a bad game against Philadelphia. I've been focusing on him more than the other dudes. But on the left side, Tyron looks like Tyron.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler looks like Tyler. But on the right side, it feels like that's where the pressure's coming from these days.
Yeah, and, it's difficult week to week to know if he's better or if he's just not going against a destroyer. And, against the Giants, really not a whole lot, and they only have one edge over there. I'm trying to remember if Thibodeau was going up against him just a whole lot. Carolina has, decent edges, but they really didn't get a whole lot of chance to get after it. Washington had traded both of their edges away. They were both good, but they are both gone, so that doesn't help us at all. So he gave up 0 pressures in that game, and then comes back on Thursday night and had some trouble.
Mafe is pretty good.
Maffei's pretty good. Darrell Taylor's fine. They got some strength in numbers, the Seahawks do. And, they were, man, Dak took some hits.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing is, when you watch this league, there's an element of just the ticking time bomb of massive injury. And not only is Dak taking hits, but he's actually seemingly looking to take them now as a leveling up. He is seeking contact so he can flex on them, which is cool until a collarbone goes, which we won't even suggest. But Steele was a problem, and so I'm guessing that Hassan Reddick is taking some notes, but he doesn't really need to because Hassan Reddick put on a clinic on Terrence Steele 5 weeks ago, and this is a great chance for Steele to prove that he's regained some sea legs. But man, the faster track actually should play in Reddick's favor in a matchup like this.
And on the defensive side of the ball, going back to Thursday, Deron Bland struggled in the first half with DK Metcalf, so much so that in the second half they had Stephon Gilmore travel with them, which we rarely ever see. The Eagles have their big-bodied receiver with A.J. Brown, who was teammates with DK at Mississippi. I often forget about that.
How did they not win every game?
My God.
They're in the Patrick Mahomes class of how did they not win every game in college.
Do you think we'll have Gilmore travel with A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I do. I'll be honest, though, looking at the tape, and Gilmore's great. Gilmore played really, really well. I'm still shocked that Seattle kind of lost interest in attacking with the DK Metcalf. There was one of those fourth downs. I think the one that Bland almost picked off, where they threw it to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was reasonably open. He just didn't have time to get to the top of his stem and out of his break before Geno had to get the ball out. If you look at that same play, which I actually featured this morning, you can see that Metcalf has inside on Gilmore, and there's really nothing Gilmore can do about it. I mean, Gilmore's a great player. Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. If DK Metcalf gets an inside shoulder on you on a slant or a post, it's over.
80% of the routes he runs should be something towards the inside, just because he's going to box you out.
From the Bobby Petrino Feed the Studs School of Football, how DK Metcalf doesn't have 12 targets every game is crazy to me. In fact, watching that entire Seahawks offense, and I realize the offensive line has been banged up, but what year isn't it? But, man, if you had Kenneth Walker most of the season and those 3 wide receivers, and you're ranked in the 20s in almost every offensive category, what are you doing? That's crazy. I'm not positive that there are 3 teams in the entire NFL that have 3 better receivers and Noah Fant and Kenneth Walker. Like, that skill position group should be capable of a deep playoff run, I think. And Geno may not be as good as he showed us on Thursday. I don't know if he can do that 3 out of 4 Sundays. I'm guessing he can't, given their record and given, his statistical performances. But on that night, Seattle looked like a NFC contender to me, just offensively, and that's really what this game is.
So they put up over 300 yards passing. That's twice. No,
that
Washington?
That was a season high.
Okay, season high.
Yeah,
which was surprising because it's Geno, and
nothing
against Geno, he's pretty average.
The most yards the Cowboys have given up through the air easily since last Christmas Eve against Gardner Minshew and A.J. Brown.
I still feel like there's not a lot of concern there in the I guess secondary, even though this one looked bad.
Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't great from the safeties, and you do miss Trayvon Diggs. Let's not kid ourselves. That, we've gotten used to it, but it doesn't mean it's not a problem. The Seahawks clearly had Deron Bland's name circled on the whiteboard of we will attack him, especially if they think he's going to man up with DK Metcalf. But they kept attacking him when he switched to Smith and Jigba. They kept attacking him when he switched to Tyler Lockett. That's where he got his interception. And I'm not down on Bland. I'm just telling you, there are mismatches in this league, like in every league, where the other team is like, let's feed on that until they stop. And it took till halftime. The Cowboys did not change their minds on Bland on Metcalf until halftime, and then they got away from it really well. But it was a really interesting night because by the end of the night, Bland had responded, and Jordan Lewis was making some of the bigger plays.
Right.
And in fact, that 3rd and 2 crosser where he is basically hip to hip with Smith and Jigba, man, if that goes how I think it was going to go, and that dude is running down the sideline, that game's very much in peril. I got to give Jordan Lewis a lot of credit. I joke about his lack of coverage skills quite a bit, to the point where he blocked me properly. And, but the Thursday night he was really, really good late when it counted.
What do you make of J-Ron? It feels like J-Ron Kearse, the last handful of games, he's been out of position a few times. You saw it on Thursday night. I know he's been dealing with some stuff, but it feels like he's regressed a little bit this year.
Maybe,
and we're
but
picking nits.
Well, I honestly, I think he's a good box safety in terms of stopping the run and in terms of those short passes. But if you can make him turn and go vertical, yeah, you can get after him. I mean, he doesn't have great long speed. In fact, I think his combine time was actually quite poor. And, we saw even Noah Fant run away from him. But that's the thing, man. You look at Noah Fant, you look at Evan Ingram last night on Monday Night Football for the Jaguars. These tight ends are so athletic that so many of them look like wide receivers. And then you watch DK Metcalf, and you're like, that dude's a tight end wide receiver too. And it's just – the athletes in this league are insane. And so to ask these corners at barely 195 or 200 to handle 240 and 245, and I know J-Ron Kearse is bigger, but he doesn't have the hips. So the search for the basketball type body of a NFL defensive back, you need like a 2 guard, maybe a point guard, and just that ability to turn and stop on a dime and change direction and still have the long speed. Man, if you have that skill set, you're going to make some money.
You think Shaq's going to play Sunday night?
Great question. Their linebacker situation
they need linebackers.
Yeah.
Is, remember when Nakobe Dean was going to fix everything for the decade, and they let T.J. Edwards go to Chicago, and they've been trying this year with variations. They brought in Zach Cunningham. They brought in Miles Jack. They brought in everybody and their brother. It is not a surprise that they would go right to Shaq Leonard. Morrow's been playing a lot for them. They just haven't found any linebackers that they really like, and this has actually been an ongoing thing, that they've been able to scheme around with pass rush and secondary play, but I'm telling you, the Eagles' secondary is not very good.
No.
They have names, and Byard and Slay and certainly Bradbury. They have guys that you recognize who have played good football in this league. I'm just telling you, this year they're having a really hard time allowing their pass rush to to cover guys long enough for your pass rush to get home. It's the marriage, pressure picks and coverage sacks. That's how it works. If you have coverage, you get sacks. If you have pressure, you get picks.
And I know that it's Christian McCaffrey, and that's a different animal with the zone blocking scheme of Shanahan, but feels like they can be run on too. And that's something I would like to maybe see Sunday night. I mean, Pollard has been
okay.
better.
So, yes, the Cowboys can run on them.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Eagles have had a hard time getting their running game going. But, yeah, they're not quite the run defense that we've come to expect. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Cowboys are willing to lean into that, because what's made them good is they pass first, second, and third most of the time. They run just to keep you honest.
I'll take 35-20. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll take that ratio.
I will too. No, huge Sunday night for the Cowboys. We all know it. But the morale would be pretty low if they drop this game to an Eagles team that's pretty beat up. Although, the logic will be the Eagles won't play that bad twice in a row. We'll see.
You got the morning show tomorrow?
I do.
You got the 8:40 bit ready?
Captain Bob.
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
He's been workshopping characters like you wouldn't
We're all
believe.
trying to figure it out.
For the real story behind some of wrestling's biggest moments, it's Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson, too.
1995, when WCW announces they're going to be live and head-to-head with Monday Night Raw, feels like this would have been something Vince would have kind of laughed off.
No, we did not like them moving to Monday nights. There were a lot of hotels. They all carried CNN, TBS, and TNT. Vince was convinced that Ted Turner had deviously done this deal to get in the hotels and keep us out.
Something to Wrestle, wherever you listen.
Every single day, every game, I want Dirk there, and I know he's Dirk, so he can do whatever he wants. And if he wants to be on, they'll have him on whenever. But I was kind of surprised he did the entire game, and he was Dirk. He was fun. He was having a good time. He had full reign on whatever he wanted to do, and it just kind of brought everybody up. Followell was in a good mood. Devin Harris, who's been doing a lot of games this year for Harp. I think Harp is taking a little time off. But Devin Harris seemed like he was just kind of cracking jokes a long time with his buddy. And they actually let Dirk bring it out of break once because he wanted to. So this was in the first quarter last night.
Okay.
They were about to go to break, and then you hear Dirk jump in.
It's the Mavericks who are playing the good defense so far. They lead 23-11 at the second timeout.
I'm going to bring us out of the timeout.
Oh, okay.
I got it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I got this. Just hop on my back, guys. Hop on my back.
Here we go.
Welcome back, guys. We are here at AAC, a big matchup in-season tournament today against the Houston Rockets. Oops, what's happening here? We're about 3 minutes to go, still in the first quarter. Good defensive start for our Mavs so far. And let's talk about in-season tournament a little bit, guys. Let's talk about the standings. What are we looking at here?
I like how you're handling your transition. Driving the bus
transition.
right now. Yeah, thank you very much.
That's great.
He's a natural. Just let him
Absolutely.
cook. They were showing the standings of the in-season tournament, and he obviously had a producer in his ear.
Yeah,
he's like, wait, what's going on? I
He
hear
made
another
mention
voice.
of that about the producer talking in the ear, which TV professionals get used to, but Dirk not accustomed to that. But, yeah, it was great to see Dirk there the whole night. I'm surprised, like you said, he was there the whole game because you saw him pregame with Damaris, and you thought maybe he would sit in for a stretch of the game, but he was there all 4 quarters. And it turned into a pretty good contest because the Mavericks were able to win. The defense in the second half wasn't as good as it was in the first half. But that Alperen Sengun, 31 points, that guy is a problem.
Yeah, he's underrated. He's been around for a little bit, but he's gotten better every year. And, yeah, putting up 30 points last night. Derek Lively has continued to play really well. Now, he did get in foul trouble last night, but he's a young center, and that happens. You're going to deal with that this season. He's going to foul out of games. He's going to get into foul trouble. It's just something he's got to learn to be able to play with.
Houston's fun to watch. I mean, they've got Jalen Green. We know he's good. But you bring in Dylan Brooks, who is a total bitch.
Oh, yeah.
But he's very productive. He can play defense. He can
got
score.
cooked last night.
He did get cooked last night. Didn't have any rebounds either. And he actually fouled out of the game. And the play he fouled out on where he supposedly grabbed Kyrie, that was a perfect acting job by Kai as he flopped. And they even reviewed it. And the ref still said, was it Scott Foster last night?
It was definitely a Scott Foster game.
it was-
And Dirk talked about Scott. He didn't say anything negative, but he's like, oh, yeah, there's Scotty doing his thing.
Yeah, it was some questionable calls throughout, but that's just about every NBA game these days.
And you mentioned it, Kyrie in the second half. He had a poor first half, but I feel like sometimes we kind of take for granted seeing Kyrie Irving in a Mavs jersey. They wore the black City editions last night, which are fantastic.
Yeah, they look good.
But just to see him get to the basket and his up and under move he makes, and we've seen this for over a decade now when he's in the playoffs, when we watch him on TV. But now that we get to see him next door playing with Luka, like this is something special we get to watch.
Bit of a change in the starting lineup last night. Derrick Jones Jr. came off the bench. Actually played really well off the bench in 34
He's been a nice
minutes.
find.
He had a nice punctuation dunk at the end. He had 15 points.
He can hit a wide-open three.
Green was starting last night, which, I mean, he ran around a bunch, and he grabbed 7 rebounds, so he hit a 3, which was cool. I don't know. We've talked about Josh Green. We're not huge fans, but whatever. If he can be active, and if you want to make that change to make yourself a little bit more athletic to match up against an improved Rockets starting 5, okay.
And I get it.
Fine.
This is the time of the season when you're experimenting with your rotation, and Josh Green isn't starting caliber, but if they need him at some point to see if he can play starting minutes, playing 30 minutes last night, and instead of Derrick Jones Jr., you're just kind of messing with some things during the season to see how that sticks. So I get that. And
4 minutes for Jaden Hardy, which I don't like.
I don't either.
But he's young. Dante Exum feels like he's going to take away minutes from somebody, because even though that signing didn't really wow us in the offseason, that is a pretty good worker bee. So for him to be your, 8th, 9th guy off the bench, you could do a lot worse than Dante Exum.
Yeah, just a signing that was a flyer. They said, okay, if you make the team, that's great. If not, whatever. And he's been able to contribute, and he's been good. I want to play this audio before we end the show here. This was Jason Kidd after the game, and he was asked a question by Tim McMahon.
Last year, after you guys traded for Kyrie, the clutch situations were a struggle. And this year, you guys are among the best in the league in those situations. What have you seen the difference in the dynamic, specifically with Luka and Kyrie when you're closing games?
I think maybe it's the things that you guys thought should have happened day one, is that they should be successful right off the bat. And it takes time. Failing is all right. It's not a bad thing to fail for a pro athlete, because you can get better and learn from it. And those two are the best in the world, and we feel very comfortable with those two having the ball. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't, but we learn from it, and I think they've answered that question from day one. As you just mentioned, they're one of the best, if not the best, in clutch time. But that was a big thing you guys wanted to make a big deal about last year. But you're not making a big deal about it this year because it's going good, right? So write some positive.
I just asked you a question.
And I'm giving you a answer. Like, you guys, there's all right to write positive stuff. People will read your positive. You don't always have to be negative. Right? Like, it's just the world's already negative enough, right? So let's see some positive stuff on some positive people that are doing their job on a nightly basis.
Making it a lot easier to do that this year.
Well, we're only into this year. We can't go back to last year, right? Like, that's the problem. Have a good night.
That was a walk-off.
And that was the real Jason Kidd, by the way. That wasn't the fake Jason Kidd. But that's all I can hear.
Okay, this had to be a lingering thing with Tim McMahon and stuff he's written in the past, because I went back and listened. There's not a lot of questions about that leading into that question by Timmy Mack. This is just Jason Kidd had this in his crawl, and he decided to unload on McMahon, which, McMahon's doing his job, because as much as Jason Kidd probably doesn't like it, that's one thing we were very focused on this offseason, because things went horrible at the end of last year because your two stars did not mesh together, and now they are, and that's great. So maybe some positive S will be written.
Yeah, we'll have some nice positive S from Tim McMahon, as Cray Trey would call him.
For the real story behind some of wrestling's biggest moments, it's Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson, too.
1995, when WCW announces they're going to be live and head-to-head with Monday Night Raw, feels like this would have been something Vince would have kind of laughed off.
No, we did not like them moving to Monday nights. There were a lot of hotels. They all carried CNN, TBS, and TNT. Vince was convinced that Ted Turner had deviously done this deal to get in the hotels and keep us out.
Something to Wrestle, wherever you listen.
Started a text chain, and Giorgio rudely interrupted my Thanksgiving with a text that basically said, I told you this was going to be an S show.
I said, I told you this was a bad idea.
And I'm sitting there enjoying Dolly's halftime performance. Now, she comes out and she's wearing a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader's outfit.
I thought that was illegal.
What do you mean?
I thought you had to be a Cowboys cheerleader to wear the outfit.
You thought a law had been passed?
A Cowboys law? Didn't y'all? Had you always heard that?
Who makes the Cowboys laws?
No, I'd never heard that. So, like, little girls can't go as a cowboy cheerleader for Halloween.
Maybe they have a carve out for Halloween costumes. But think about it. I bet you haven't seen many of those.
You've made up that law.
No, I hadn't.
You're telling me Charlotte's never dressed as one?
I don't think so.
She has access to the costume closet.
Jerry's never dressed as one behind closed doors.
I can't confirm that.
Guaranteed he and Jimmy used to dress in cheerleader costumes.
And I did.
And she performs. Now, clearly she was lip syncing.
By the way.
What?
Stop.
By the way, back to your observation. You might be right about that. It's like Rogers, number 12, is retired, but it's not official.
Yeah, it's just something I've always heard. You can't...
You might be right about that, but they would be willing to make an exception for Dolly in this case. My question is, whose idea was that? Dolly's?
Cowboys.
Jerry's? Jean's? Charlotte's?
I think it could have been any one of those. I think that there was no disagreement. Like one person said it and everyone thought it was a great idea.
I think they had to talk Dolly into it.
And it was a great idea. Dolly Parton dressed up as a cowboy cheerleader. That was awesome. Now, a lot of people were snarky because what's she doing wearing that outfit? It's embarrassing. She's got grandma bod.
That's
She's
incredible.
77.
She's 77. She can wear that and pull it off. That was the best thing about it, I guess.
There may not be any other 77-year-olds that can pull that off the way she did.
Right. And, okay, so the main objections to this, Giorgio, you have no problem with her wearing the outfit, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay, you have no problem with her lip syncing.
Look, I was just told long before it was announced, this was going to be a blockbuster halftime performer. And as much as I love Dolly, I just think it's very outdated and very, oh, really? And we get 2 Queen songs at the end? I just thought the whole thing was...
She's promoting a new album.
I thought the whole thing was cringy.
Gosh.
Sorry.
All right, yes, it was a blockbuster halftime show for this reason. Can you name me who rivals Dolly as far as beloved older female artist? Cher, maybe? Cher?
Yeah, maybe.
But
maybe.
I don't think Cher is as beloved right now as Dolly is.
No.
And Cher's beloved.
Yeah.
You can't top her. If you go with a male solo artist, who are you going to go with? I mean, McCartney?
Well, I guess my question is, why do you have to go 60 plus? Why do you have to go 70 plus? To me, it just seemed...
Well, not everyone has to be under the age of 50.
I totally agree. But again, it was explained to me, hey, this is going to be just earth-shattering, what we have for halftime. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, she's a legend.
I think the only thing that could have topped her would be Taylor Swift in terms of blockbuster.
I think that's a no-brainer
national,
topping.
Sure.
And I just think...
Yeah, I said that's the only thing that could have topped her. And this is in terms of national appeal, beloved by this country, eyeballs that are going to tune in.
I think you could come up with a longer list than
Like,
Taylor
for example,
Swift.
whoever said McCartney, there's no way people are as interested in that as Dolly.
Yeah, we've seen
No
McCartney.
way. This was blockbuster. Now,
I don't know if it's Blockbuster.
I don't think she pulled it off.
And I love Dolly, but I don't know that she's Blockbuster.
All right, let's take it piece by piece. We have no problem with the outfit, right?
Fine.
We have no problem with the lip syncing because
that's just what you
all
do
bands
at
have to do
now.
that.
That's fine. Who cares?
Do we have a problem with the fact that she's having to hold on to things up there on the stage in order to stay upright?
I had a huge problem with that. My biggest problem was that she looked like she had no idea what to do with her hands. They should have given her a microphone or a walker to balance herself.
Not give her a walker. That would have been all anyone would have talked about if she had the tennis balls on the walker and kind of got maybe 3/4 of the way across the stage during the whole performance.
Right.
It took her that long.
She did not know what to do with her hands, and that made it look awkward from the start. If she had been holding a mic instead
I'm with
of
you.
wearing
She should have
that
had a
one,
handheld mic.
just hold the mic and give yourself a little bit of balance. You're used to that, obviously. But she kept throwing her hands around like she had no idea what to do with them, and then she's grabbing onto the stage. That's when it went south.
Yeah, why didn't they just put her in a harness and they could have they could have moved her around the stage in the harness. Like just hooked her to the spider cam and then joystick that thing around a little bit. And that'd be her dancing. Her legs just hanging limply down below her.
There were reports that the stage was not put together properly and it was loose, and that's why she was holding on.
And I was thinking that maybe she was supposed to be on top of that star at first, but then it was too rickety or something like that, so instead they put her down in front of it, and she just had to hold on to it. So I don't know what the story was there. What about the song selection?
Terrible.
We got some Jolene,
which is the biggest ender in the history of music.
Okay. That's a little overstated, isn't it?
George Dunham on That's Twitter. Just my personal thing. That song has always just taken a 7-iron right to both testicles. I'm sorry.
Worse than We Built This City on Rock and Roll?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's no way.
Yeah, I could listen to We Built This City 10 times.
That's a bold statement.
Before I would listen to Jolene.
Jolene is so much better than that.
And
I used to not like Jolene either, but it's really grown on me.
I would sue me for that statement.
Oh,
I
okay.
would.
All right. Well, that's fair. At least you're suing yourself over that statement. And then 9 to 5, you got no problem with 9 to 5, right?
No, great song.
Catchy song,
Yeah,
great song.
Yeah.
And then I think she went into the Queen stuff, right?
Yep.
And did the 2 Queen songs.
That's when I fell over and
But she got
exhaustion.
loop on the Queen songs. Was it on what was the one? What was the line?
She did "We Are the Champions" and then she did "We Will Rock You."
Yeah, "We Will Rock You," but she only did the we will rock you" part over and over. And long after you thought that she should do another part of it before going back to it, she just kept going "We Will Rock You." It was almost like the CD was skipping.
And the drummer going crazy that looked a little like you. He's real over the top.
He has ticket ties.
Oh, he does?
Somebody, I need to go and chase this down, but somebody either texted me or DM'd me and said that was his friend was going to be the drummer for Dolly.
He was like you, pretending to be over the top and lots of...
He was doing a bit.
Yeah.
I think he was trying to do a bit to make his friends laugh.
I didn't think they should have done either Queen song. And my guess is...
I'm with you. You're Dolly Parton. Do Dolly Parton songs.
Yes.
Maybe at the very end sing "We Will Rock You" 4 times as a coda to this whole performance. And then that's it.
I think the Cowboys asked her to do "We Are the Champions."
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's
Well, if you
such
want
a crappy choice from where we've been the last 28 years. Just the whole thing just made me want to throw up turkey.
Hey, but this is the year.
Could be.
You know, George, I've worked with you for 48 years.
I know.
And I still can't quite understand your thinking on some things because oftentimes you will defend things that clearly need some criticism. And then there's something like this that you criticize that should have at least a few good words for.
I know. I shouldn't be such a big jerk.
You are a big jerk.
I am. I'm a total big jerk. But yeah, more than just Taylor Swift, the way it was built to me that, hey, this is really going to be something. I'll give you Zach Bryan, Dua Lipa, Luke Combs, Drake, Morgan Wallen, Doja Cat, Lainey Wilson, The Weeknd, Post Malone, Billie Eilish, Chris Stapleton, I think, more impactful performers than what you gave us last Thursday. Now, if you want to go, I guess legends, then okay. If we only have legends to choose from,
it's a different.
Dolly's right up
It's
there.
a different category than those people you named. Those people you named are still,
and you
active,
were right
prime
there,
of career type things.
Right, you were right there when it was told to us. When I suggested a Texas, somebody like George Strait or someone from the Texas scene, I was told, "Oh no, this is going to knock your socks off." I'm sorry, it didn't knock my socks off when I heard the announcement, and what I saw Thursday certainly didn't knock my socks off. She almost fell off the stage.
I think what you're missing here is when that person said blockbuster, they're thinking brand. They're thinking American eyeballs. If you held a picture of Chris Stapleton and Dolly Parton, 5% of America could identify Chris Stapleton, 95% of American could identify Dolly Parton. That's what they're talking about, blockbuster brand. None of those people that you listed, unless you listed Taylor Swift, has a bigger brand than Dolly. And what are the Cowboys all about? Brand.
And thinking of
sounds like someone was just roasted.
There's just I wasn't roasted there at all. I gave you names that are more impactful from a musical standpoint.
Impactful, though. Define that.
Well, I would
Have
say
they had as
I would
many
say
hits as
interest
Dolly?
I would say interest. Now, this game, I guess, was the highest rated game in the history of football.
Yep. And a lot of that had to do with Dolly.
Yeah.
I didn't hear
regular
that.
season.
A lot of that had to do with Dolly. And if
I
it's
wonder
Zach
that.
Bryan, they don't get 41 million viewers. There's no way.
I don't know. He's the one who breaks the internet more than anyone in music right now.
Well, I would love to hear what the numbers are if they break out the halftime show.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting.
Because otherwise, was this like a huge matchup?
No, it was a terrible game.
So why would the ratings
Dolly.
be so high?
It's Dolly. Dolly's brand.
That's the only thing I can think of. Why else would everyone be tuning in?
Dua Lipa does not get 41 million to tune in. I'm
I would have
sorry.
been more excited about it.
Well, yes, you would be, but we're separating from who we are personally excited by who is
right. And I'm not saying I'm the biggest Dua Lipa fan out there. I'm just saying impactful. You may have had a similar impact as far as tune-in goes.
Okay. Well, I didn't think it was as bad as, and it wasn't just you, Giorgio. I mean, obviously there were some people on X who were taking shots at the expense of Dolly, at her expense. So,
well, that's I hate
and
that
it was
because
very
I
unfortunate.
love Dolly, and I've
because she
I
has
feel
always
bad about
been,
everything I've already said.
She's always been such an incredibly positive figure.
I know,
always says
and that's
positive
the other
things
thing,
about
too.
her. When have you ever heard Dolly
I
getting
take
in
it
a
all back.
beef with someone?
I know. I take it all back.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I can. Fair catch after the play.
I voted thumbs up. You voted 2 thumbs down. Craig, were you 2 thumbs down or 1 thumb down, 1 thumb sideways?
I gave it 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb down. There was a lot of it that I thought was just awkward.
I'm confused by that, but okay.
But I don't give the choice thumbs down. I gave part of the performance thumbs down.
And what do we think about Dak and Turkey Leg?
Hilarious.
There was the best part of the performance, I thought.
Which was?
I'll tell you at 7:35.
Excellent. Good night, everybody.
Right now, 6:35.
From the Dallas Morning News, Around the Horn, Richardson High School Hall of Famer,
still
lead columnist for the Dallas Morning News. It is Tim Kalishaw. Hey, Tim.
How we doing?
Doing well.
Good.
Thanks for coming in.
Always.
And also making the trek in early, hours before he helps host the Sweet Spot that goes from 1, 2, 3. It's the Talking Sea Bass, Sean Bass.
Hey there, Moose, Musers, Tim.
Sean.
I got tickled there.
Yeah, he did get tickled there. All right, well, we got Cowboys-Eagles week. This will be great. Sean will be a part of the pregame show. It's such a big game, Kalishaw may even be in the house on Sunday night.
Probably will be there.
Yeah.
I think I'll be
okay.
there.
This must be a big game.
Yep.
And even bigger after what happened to Philly a couple of days ago, and the Cowboys survive a Thursday night game with Seattle. Why don't we start with there? What did you take out of the Seahawks game, Tim?
Well, I mean, I thought it was from a Cowboy fan's perspective a little disappointing to see that the defense could be kind of consistently shredded like that by an offense that really hasn't been good for quite a while. And obviously they're capable of it. DK Metcalf is a monstrous physical player, but I just think from that play they hit on their third play, the 74-yarder to him, I just think that got the whole thing going. They really didn't have much of a running game, but they kind of stayed with it. And the fact that they were able to get 35 points here when the Cowboys are coming up against all these really good offenses, top-ranked offenses in the league, not just Philadelphia, but the 3 weeks after, I just thought it was mostly a bad sign. Now, obviously, it was nice they came back and won. That's important. But we hadn't seen that really at home with this defense.
Yeah.
And it just got me to thinking about, really, if you think about their 3 big games, at San Francisco, at Philly, and Seattle would be the third best team they've played. How did the defense play in any of those games? Not great.
Right.
So they make spectacular plays against the Giants and Commanders and Carolina and the rest, but they need that defense to be special against the good teams in the next month.
You know, I started going through upon further review that I think we're probably going to do on Thursday, Sean, and I think Dan Quinn had a really rough day or rough night because Seattle, as Tim mentioned, they didn't run the ball all over Dallas, but they got their 4 yards on first or second down, so then they would have a favorable third down. And then I know Deron Bland got taken apart for how he played at the beginning of the game, but he had no safety help on that 74-yarder, and on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, Cowboy corners would be off the line of scrimmage 10 or 15 yards. That was their line. I don't know. It seemed like a rough night for the DC.
It was weird to see the DBs play back so much. But the thing that got me the first half of that game, the pass rush just wasn't getting home. And as the game progressed, they got more pressure on Geno. Obviously, they made the big stops late. But the fact they couldn't generate enough pressure early in that game, and Geno was making a real effort 2-3 steps, get the ball out. And DK Metcalf was he's a hell nightmare for anybody.
Yes.
And I like the fact Dan Quinn decided, okay, Bland is getting cooked here. Let's start traveling Stephon Gilmore with him in the second half. And as that happened, I think the defense played a little bit better.
Yeah.
Seeing what San Francisco has done to Philadelphia and Dallas, is this game on Sunday for second place?
Yes, absolutely. That's all that's at stake.
Second best team in the NFC.
You can cash everything else in. No, what I think that means is, like, if everybody plays as well as they possibly can, San Francisco is probably going to win or going to get to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. They reach a level in those big games, beating those two teams by 55 points, that Dallas and Philadelphia have not got to. They've both won a ton of games, but they're close when they play somebody good like Seattle. But the 49ers, their confidence, I think, against the Cowboys is kind of off the charts when they play them after those 2 playoff wins and what they did this year. So I think that's really hard for Dallas to think about going to San Francisco and having to beat them there. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but, I mean, they're the best team. But like Peter said, their operation falls apart a little bit when they're not healthy. And so 6 weeks from now, you don't know who's going to be doing what, because guys do get hurt in this league. But when they've got everybody on both sides of the ball, they're immense.
It's pretty sobering because the first quarter of that game against Philadelphia, Purdy was rattled. They were doing nothing offensively, and then they just said, okay, Kyle Shanahan, take a deep breath, and then just run your offense, and they put up 400-something yards and 42 points. So, yeah, when they're fully operational, they're the best team in the National Football League, both sides of the ball.
There's some Dak MVP talk. We briefly talked about this with Peter King an hour ago, and Peter's right. It really doesn't matter when you start having MVP talk in October or November. And maybe Dak has been the benefactor of who they've played, but if he plays like that, like he did last Thursday against the Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, and Lions, the Cowboys will be in good shape, and absolutely he'll be in the conversation.
I think he's going to be in the top 3 for sure. And I think he actually has a chance to win it, especially if San Francisco turns out to be the best team, because there'll be a few people vote for McCaffrey, but not that many. And there might even be a couple people vote for Purdy or Debo or something, trying to figure out what to do with San Francisco. And if Hurts doesn't, right now Dak's stats are better than Hurts. If those continue, if that disparity kind of continues to grow, and say Dallas finishes 13-4, I think a lot of people will vote for him, and he might win it by getting a lot of second place votes. But he's definitely in the hunt. But they do have to win at least 3 of the next 4 games for him to stay in that hunt.
He's got to have a huge December. That's number one. But man, Lamar's having a great year. Tyreek Hill might have 2,000 yards, and I know that it's a quarterback award these days, but if you have a receiver that goes for 2,000 yards, and much like the Cowboys, the Dolphins are a team that needs to prove that they can beat good teams. And if they beat some good teams along the way, and Hill's going for 150 a game, I think there might be a lot of people in a year where, Aaron Rodgers isn't playing, Tom Brady's no longer here. They might say, wow, this guy did something special. Let's just vote for him.
Yeah.
And whether it's MVP worthy or not, I'm just really encouraged by what Dak has done the last 4 weeks. I think it's as good as I've seen him play.
It's the most command he's ever had over this offense. And for years and years, you felt like he was just kind of going along with whatever Kellen Moore, even the first 5 games of this season, you thought he was just being a yes man for McCarthy's system. But he's really taken charge. And to see that happen at the age of 30 in year 8, that's something I didn't think I was going to see from him. So he's proven a lot to me and I think the fan base this season.
I just think they did a lot during the bye week to transform the offense from what it had done the first 6 weeks. And the things we've talked about here, the things you talked about with Peter here, moving the quarterback and more motion and things, and just that offense was stagnant in the beginning of the season. Dak was just throwing short slants. And then all of a sudden, now he looks like he's as good as he's ever looked, and CeeDee Lamb's obviously playing the best he's ever played. So they did something during the bye week to open up the offense, and Pollard getting going a little bit in the running game obviously helps too. But yeah, that's been a transformation, I think.
This week's edition of the Pigskin Panel, a day early because of the Ticket's White Elephant tomorrow. We've got Tim Calishaw from the Dallas Morning News and Sean Bass from the Sweet Spot here on the Ticket. Yesterday, Philadelphia won the Shaq Leonard sweepstakes. Is that a big deal, Tim?
I think it's a deal. They'd had injuries at linebacker, and Dallas obviously has had the same and was short there. And I feel like Dallas is always in these hunts for guys that they don't end up getting. I don't know that. I mean, and last year was Odell Beckham Jr., who didn't end up playing for anybody and hasn't been any good this year. So I'm not really sure what all the time wasted talking about that a year ago was. This is a better player. He definitely helps the Eagles at a place where they can use a little help. They have mostly a really good front seven, but they've had linebacker injuries. I don't know that the Cowboys needed to make a change. They play with a lot of speed. They're not big back there. He would have helped them some, but yeah, I mean it's a small, I guess, boost for the Eagles. Not a huge one.
Yeah, I think they need him a little bit more than Dallas does. If you just look at their linebacking situation, they got an undrafted Nicholas Morrow as their starting Mike. Shaq Leonard's probably going to take that spot, and I would guess he's going to play more for Philadelphia than he would for Dallas, because ideally you would say, okay, he's a Cowboy, he's going to play on rundowns first and second, then you bring in Marquise Bell for coverage, but he was getting 65% of the snaps in Indianapolis, and that was his big bone of contention. And now he had a couple of back surgeries last year, so they were probably trying to spoon feed him along this season. But I feel like that Dan Quinn pitched him of what his idea for his role in this defense would be, and I think it could just be he's thinking, man, I'll get more snaps in Philadelphia, and they're leading the division. That That could be the whole thing.
Maybe the Eagles just got him in case they face the Colts in the Super Bowl, and they'll have all their inside info.
Is Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew.
For those of us who picked the Colts a year ago, we were just
ahead of our time.
Just missed it.
As you note, they're slowly creeping up the standings.
Yeah, and you bring up the division, and this is seen if the Cowboys win, technically they would be in first place in the NFC East. But we've talked about the Cowboys' schedule. Then the Eagles have Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, Giants to finish out. Unless they tank, this division it's not over, but, it's heavily stacked towards Philly.
Kyler, look out.
Yeah, they're a little better. Yeah.
Well, that Cardinals
and the Cowboys already lost to the Cardinals.
Dude,
so
that's going to linger so much
I know.
as we head through
It's
December.
going to cost them something.
Yes, it will. You knew it at the time.
Yeah. I think the important thing to remember when you're talking about if the Cowboys win Sunday and they're tied, and people will say the Cowboys, as of right now, have the tiebreaker because they've played more division games. But if they both win out after that game Sunday, the Eagles have the division.
They got it.
Because they have a better conference record. The Eagles' loss to the Jets doesn't hurt them as much as the Cowboys' loss to Arizona hurts them. So the problem for Dallas, to me, is you got to win Sunday. Okay, I think a lot of us can see that happening. Then Philly has to lose probably to Seattle the next week, which you can kind of envision after it's at Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Although Seattle will be coming off a game against the 49ers, so they'll be beat to hell, and they'll be under 500. 6 of their players will be injured. But after that, as Sean was starting to say, the Giants, Cardinals, Giants finish, you're counting on Tyrod Taylor or the Cardinals after that. Meanwhile, while you're beating Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit.
Yeah.
Right.
Any one stumble there, then the Eagles got to lose twice.
The Eagles have been I said going to San Francisco. Now maybe it's just San Francisco that can do that to them. Certainly 42-19. But, man, they've had close calls against the Commanders. There may be another and they've lost to the Jets. There may be another loss in there for them somewhere. But they may need two.
Maybe the whole Dom thing just hangs over them the rest of the season. Maybe they're rattled now.
See Dom with Leonard yesterday at the airport.
Really?
He does everything.
Washington and Texas will be down in New Orleans for the Sugar. Did we talk about the reaction of Michigan's once they saw Alabama? Because it was, they knew they were in, so they didn't worry about as far as being in. Yeah. They're announced number 1, and, of course, they stand up and cheer, and they're going crazy. And then once they got to number 4 and it was Alabama, it was an audible groan that you heard from Michigan when they went, oh, man, because they were hoping for Florida State.
Yeah.
So they can try to see if they can get their first college football playoff win. It was interesting. When I saw that, I went, oh, man, they realized that this thing is going to be tough.
Very unfortunate for them, I would imagine. But I think both games are going to be good, but I do think even if it was Florida State, Michigan might have looked at that and said, we don't have to deal with their starting quarterback. But those two defenses, Florida State's defense would have given Michigan's offense a lot of problems. And now I think the same thing with Alabama, but we'll get into that more so. But I do think it's interesting because as the college football playoff expands, and this is the future because this is the final year of the 4-team, and next year I think it's going to be great. I'll be curious because we're not going to be debating 4 and 5. Will we debate 12 and 13?
Of course. And it doesn't matter how many teams you put in there. The bottom of the list will be debated every single time. Put 32 teams in, and we'll argue 32, 33,
yes,
and
like we do for the NCAA basketball
No question about it.
But I think one thing that is you got to keep in mind that I don't think people are aware of or they have forgotten. There are going to be a lot of arguments when, for instance, this year, Liberty, who's ranked 23rd in the poll, Liberty would be in the college football playoff and the expanded playoff because they are the highest group of 5 team. Mm-hmm. And so if they qualify like that and they give you your 5 highest conference champions, and one of those has to be the group of 5 team, then Liberty would go on the road to whoever 5 would be, which I guess is Florida State in this example. Florida State would host that, and I love that. The fact that they are doing 5, 6, 7, and 8 seeds, because the top 4 get a bye, and 5 through 8 host that first round on their campus, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. But, it's interesting because moving forward, we're going to have to become more accustomed to the non-undefeated champion. And we were talking about this in our show yesterday, our pre-show. I don't know why college football is the one sport out of all sports where the idea of perfection is what is requested, believed, expected for you to be gauged on the level of being worthy of being a champion in college football.
Yeah, it does seem weird because I guess just the way it's been set up the whole time, that's what you expect. You're undefeated, you're a champion, yay, that's great. But you look at all the other sports, and we 100% root for the underdog. If there's a 1 versus 8 matchup in hockey, and the 8 seed win, which happens way more than in the other sport, if they wind up running the, doing what they were supposed to do and win a championship, you don't think less of them because they were the 8th seed and they didn't have a better record than anyone else. That's great. It's fine. Miami last year in basketball made their way from a bottom seed to go up. They beat the number 1 seed Milwaukee, made it all the way to the NBA championship. You're not going to look down upon them if they would have won it. Who cares? They got hot at the right time. There's nothing wrong with that. So, yeah, if there's an 8 seed in the college football playoff next year and they win a championship, there's not going to be anything less thought about them at all.
No, I mean, the reality of it is I think it's going to be a lot harder for lesser teams in our minds in the way that we view them to win the national championship. I actually will be – maybe Clemson's got a shot, maybe a Florida State, but it's going to be very surprising to me if a team outside of the SEC or the Big Ten wins a championship moving forward. And I say that because Texas know you are going to the SEC. USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, they're all going to the Big Ten. There's really only a couple of schools out there that aren't in one of those two conferences moving forward that has a legitimate shot of winning it. I don't think anybody in the Big 12 will sniff a national title ever again. And I say that because when you look at the structure of what this is, those teams, unless they have a miraculous season and get a bye, say you're the Big 12 champion and it's not Texas this year, it's Oklahoma State wins the Big 12 next year, and they get in and they're the 8th seed. They got to go on the road for their first round, or I guess they'd be hosting 9. So you got to beat that team. Then you got to win in the quarterfinals, then the semifinals, and now they are forcing you to win a 4th game and a 3rd game. And I don't know that some of these other schools that don't have the depth of talent as the power blue blood schools will be able to, in 4 consecutive weeks, compete in that way. Like, it's one thing, Boise State beating OU is a great example. Anybody can beat anybody in one game. But if Boise State had to turn around after that OU game and then play USC or play Florida, I don't know that they're going to be able to string that consistent of wins together.
And what if you make your way out of that bracket and go all the way to the championship game? That's an NFL season you're playing.
Yeah.
Like, they're adding all those college football games.
17?
It is a trip how we've gone from the college kids playing 10, 11 games to now they're going to play a whole NFL season in college football. Mm-hmm. And I guess no one just has an issue with that, right? Because it's still raking in and bringing in the dough.
Yeah, and more you see the ratings have been up for college football. More and more you see games that are being viewed. CBS had a phenomenal viewing for the SEC championship game this past weekend. I think it pulled in a little over 17 million viewers, whatever it was. I mean, it is the second biggest sport in the country behind the NFL, and nothing is on the level of the NFL. But I do think, and some people will be, I like the way it used to be, where you randomly decided who the national champion was going to be, and there were teams. Well, I get pissed that Florida State got left out as an undefeated Power 5 champion. How about all the teams over the years that went undefeated that didn't get awarded a national title for whatever reason? Because the writers, the AP poll wants to vote on these guys. What about this undefeated team? You know, it's always been decided by something outside of on-field results in a lot of cases of you get invited to participate, even in the BCS. Okay, well, what decided the metrics that make the numbers that all these – why are we using these computers? Why not these other computers? And now we get to, okay, there's 13 people sitting in a room. Well, what metrics are they using? Well, they're using these metrics. Well, how do they decide that that's what weights the games that makes it fair?
It still feels odd that it took this long
to
get to 12 games.
Yeah.
I mean, 12 teams.
Yeah.
We're starting next year when you saw the lower classifications. Just have a playoffs. Is anything the most perfect way to decide a champion? Maybe not, but at least the lower levels have it right to where, okay, you have these teams. They won their they're ranked or whatever. Maybe that's the imperfect way to get them, but it feels like they always get it right as far as what team should be in the playoffs, and then you just line up and decide it on the field. Like you always had here, one game to decide it on the field, but the way to get there just seemed really weird. It's really weird.
It is.
That they've taken this damn long to adjust to the times.
And I'm glad that they finally did this. And pretty much every conference is getting rid of divisions, which is phenomenal because that will guarantee you the two best. Like this Iowa crap of playing for the Big Ten, that's gone.
Yeah.
It is going to be the two best teams in every single conference will play for the conference championship. And if you win, and I love that because, one, if you lose it, it doesn't mean you're necessarily out of the playoff. But if you win, you're in, most likely with the bye. And if you lose it, that puts so much weight on conference championship games and the ability to play in those. I think it's fantastic. This is going to, again, I don't think the Big 12 will ever get another national title when Texas and OU leave. But for TCU, for Oklahoma State, for Cincinnati, for Utah, whatever, this gives that fan base hope. You can win a playoff game. You might win two. Are you going to win four? I don't think so. But
at least you have the opportunity to now.
And more fan bases will care for deeper into the season than they do now because you can lose a second game and your season isn't over. And for the Big Ten and the SEC, and this will piss people off, there will be a 3-loss SEC team that gets into the playoff. A 9-3 SEC team will get in. Think about this year, Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss would have gotten in. LSU, borderline, probably would have gotten left out, but there will be years where the SEC is going to have 4 teams, and that fourth team will be some 9-3 SEC team, and that will all debate. How could you put a 9-3 team in? It's because they're from the SEC. Get ready for it, but the debate and the argument, it'll shift. It's not going away. I just think it's better.
So beautiful. So appropriate for the blessed season.
It's almost like if Ham put that much effort into just about anything else more constructive, the world would be such a better place. But instead, he uses his powers to make a beautiful intro for the great Mark Followell. Hey, Follow.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I couldn't hear it very well, but what I could hear was incredibly well done by Ham. But
I'm sure he'll text it to you.
Please email it or text it to me. I would love to be able to hear it more, just be able to hear it better.
Share with family and friends if this is what is my
for
song.
Sure, that'll be on Christmas Eve for sure. That will be played at the household party. You can bank on that, man.
All right, well, let's get into some Mavs talk here as everything is good in Mavs land right now. Coming off that 147-97 victory, everybody's feeling good. Forget about that couple-week stretch there with all those losses, but not really. Except for Luka. Let's get into Luka here because that's all fun. First half triple-double. Is, in your estimation, is that his best half of basketball ever or just stat stuffing against a bad team?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if it's his best. I mean, he's had so many good games that they're getting to the point that it's really hard to differentiate. You know, he had a game against the Clippers this year where he was 17 of 21 from the floor and made 10 straight shots at one point in time in the game, and that was probably a little bit more of a three-quarter game where he didn't have to play the fourth quarter or very much of the fourth quarter anyway. I think he maybe played a little bit of it, but I don't think it was just stat stuffing. I think Luka came out and his Overcuster post-game interview reflected that they did come out with the right approach to it, which is they had 3 days off. They had the sour taste of 2 difficult losses that they were kind of thinking about, and they needed to come out and have the right approach and jump on a beat-up bad team early that was missing key components. And let's face it, they got pretty fortunate here. You have to go out and win the games, but and the way these 2 added games this week came about, I mean, it could have been Denver and the Clippers could have been the 2 teams that they played. Not to say that they couldn't have won those games, and not to say that they're going to go ahead and win tonight to make it 2-0 this week, but to get Utah, who's quite beat up, and Portland, who's 6-14, and going to be missing some key components tonight. The way the schedule came together this week was really good, and now they've got to go take advantage of it, and the other night's performance was a step in that direction.
So tanking in the tournament actually paid off.
It did, yeah. So, the funny thing about it is, and I know, look, you would want to go the group stage games are regular season games, so of course those matter, but it's kind of funny how one of the byproducts of it is that if you're a team that makes the knockout stage, there's going to be one team in each conference that faces this, you have just been, by the nature of the knockout stage of it, been handed 2 losses. Because the teams that lose in the quarterfinals, there's 4 teams that lose there, and those 4 teams are paired off against each other to play tonight in what is essentially their 82nd game, the final game added to the schedule. And so somebody's going to lose tonight that lost the other night as well. So it's kind of weird how that's just the nature of it, that the way they've tried to make this fit within the regular season schedule and not add on any extra games other than obviously the Pacers and Lakers, who will play in the championship game tomorrow night. They'll be playing an 83rd game, which will have no bearing whatsoever on the regular season. But it is interesting how they've had to put together the schedule here this week, and making the knockout stage, which ideally is what you want to do, but for a couple of teams in each conference, it's going to mean that they're going to lose a couple of games. And it could be Sacramento or it could be Phoenix in the West, which are teams that are going to be, in theory, pretty close to the Mavs in the standings, we hope, at the end of the year. And here are the Mavs getting 2 pretty easy games this week that if they take advantage of it, you never know how a 1 or 2 game swing might matter in the placing in the standings when we get to the end of the year.
As DJ just mentioned, and we're speaking with Mark Followell, the voice of the Dallas Mavericks, Luka did have a triple-double in the first half, a rare feat, and he did so with a headband that I don't know that we've ever seen him sport before. Do you know the reason why, and is he going to break it back out tonight in Portland?
The latter I don't know. The answer to the former is that he said after the game the other night that his hair is getting long, he doesn't want to wear gel anymore, and he doesn't want it falling down like in his eyes or anything like that. So that is the reason for the headbands, as explained by the man himself after the game on Wednesday.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
a little different, but whatever works.
Yeah, it turned out pretty well on that one. So we've had several injuries early on in the season. I think we all know at this point part of the Kyrie Irving deal is that foot injury is not going away. That is just something that he's going to be managing for the rest of his career, but it's given a lot of opportunities
before you go any farther on that, though, I would say that if they continue with, let me look at my notes and get the number right here, he's played 16 out of 20 games. So if he plays 80% of the games this year, which would be essentially, what is that, 66, 65, 66 games, I think we would all take that.
We would definitely take that. But we've seen a lot of opportunities here for some of the younger players to get some playing time with Timmy down, with Maxey down. We've had several injuries here. How do you think the depth has responded, and do you think this is something that is going to pay dividends later, getting them some early experience this season?
Well, I wouldn't consider this guy getting necessarily early experience towards becoming establishing himself, because he's already well established. But I like that what's happened in the last week has opened up some opportunity for Seth Curry. He's had double figures in the last 3 games, and I would like to see him be a little bit more of a fixture in the rotation. Obviously, there are defensive things to be concerned about, but you also know that you're going to get a very reliable three-point shooter who, if left open, is going to be somebody who's going to shoot threes at a high percentage, and that's a key component of the Mavs offense, with all of the attention, of course, that Luka and Kyrie draw. So I don't know if this is probably not necessarily the answer that you're looking for, but he's somebody who got elevated into the rotation, and I hope he kind of sticks with it here for the time being. The young guys that are getting more opportunities, I think Omax ended up with a season high in minutes the other night, 21 against Utah. And, look, he's still got a lot of areas in which to grow, but I certainly think if you watch him and hone in on him during the game, you see a lot to like from his defensive instincts and what he does on that end of the floor. So I'm encouraged by that. And, A.J. Lawson had a big part in that run that they had at the end of the game against Oklahoma City the other night. And when he's played with the Legends this year, his shooting percentage on threes is pretty low. It's 29%. But I would suggest that when he's playing with the Legends, where he's somebody who's on the scouting report and one of the best players on the team, then the volume of threes and the kind of threes that he's forced to take there are not going to reflect the kind of wide-open threes that he would get playing as a role guy, as a 3-and-D guy around Kyrie and Luka. And the attention that those players draw will open up some opportunities for Lawson. So I know he's only on a 2-way contract, but I think if you guys have heard how much I've talked about it on the podcast with Brian over the last few months, the Mavs need to hit on one of these guys, one of these 2-way guys. I mean, Miami built a roster full of several contributing players over the past few years by hitting on their two-way guys, whether it was Duncan Robinson for a while or Max Strus, who now has moved on to Cleveland, but was a key component that started out with them as a two-way guy. And there have been other players like that. I think Gabe Vincent was somebody like that at one point in time, and obviously he's moved on as well. But the Mavs need to hit on one of those guys, and Lawson clearly, to me, looks like he's the guy most likely to do that. Not to mention, I just like the idea of kind of throwing numbers at the whole 3-and-D thing and get as many guys that have that skill set or potential skill set that you can get and bring them in under your system and try to develop them so you backfill, the loss of guys that you use as trade bait like Dorian Finney-Smith last year, for example.
Yeah, or you just don't know who's going to be hot that night. Now,
Yeah,
you mentioned
for sure.
you mentioned your Take That With You buddy, Brian Damaris, and I saw that you retweeted an article of his this morning kind of diving into the Mavs' hot start. They have cooled a little bit since they sprinted out of the gate, but can you break down kind of the precedent that they are finding themselves a part of as far as winning with such a prodigious clip at the beginning of the season?
You're talking about the win 12 of your first 20 games, right? That thing?
Right, yes.
Yeah. So the excellent writer and very, very good data researcher as well, John Schumann from NBA.com, has been writing about this for some time, for several years, and he updates his numbers every year and kind of rolls them over to where they're talking about 20-year increments each year. I haven't seen his updated numbers this year, so I just tacked on last year's numbers to what he wrote last season. And so that is that for the last 21 full 82-game seasons, a team that's won at least 12 of their first 20 games, and that's a pretty big sample size, 220 teams, 90% of those teams have gone on to make the playoffs. Now, of course, 90% is not 100%. And there's some examples of some teams last year who started out 12-8 and weren't able to sustain that and make the playoffs. The Pelicans were an example. Now, we all know they got hit hard by injuries last year, but they were the number one team in the Western Conference at one point well into the month of December, and then their season, went way down in a hurry, and they ended up in the play-in tournament. They had a 10-game losing streak at one point because they got hit by injury so hard last year. And the Jazz are another example last year. They started out 12-8, and they didn't make the playoffs. So there's no guarantees in it, but when you establish yourself as a team, a good team in the first quarter of the season, usually that is going to be, for any number of reasons, obviously a springboard into remaining good for the rest of the year and being, history tells us that you're very, very likely going to be a playoff team. But there's still, as you guys know, there's still a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work to do and some luck that you need along the way to stay healthy.
Well, hopefully they notch another win in their belt tonight in Portland. We will be watching you, Mark Followell, and tomorrow we are all Pacers fans. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, we definitely are. And as an aside to that, I think that in all seriousness, look, this is the reason, or a reason to me, and you're a Premier League fan, Davey, so I think you relate to this, and I know it's not, as I've said many times before, this is not just a soccer comparison because this is done in domestic basketball leagues in Europe as well. But it's cool whenever teams like many, many years ago, if you recall, Wigan won the FA Cup whenever they were about to get relegated out of the Premier League, and they beat Manchester City in a thrilling final at Wembley. And not too long ago, Leicester City, who of course does have a fairly recent Premier League title, a storybook Cinderella season, but they also won the FA Cup, I believe, in 21 or 20 or something like that. So, part of the reason that you have this tournament and you create something like this, and it matches up with what's been done in other leagues in other countries, is it does, because of the nature of the tournament, the single elimination, open up the possibility of a team who you wouldn't normally think of as having a chance to win the big championship and the prize at the end of the season to have a chance to win some silverware. So if the Pacers win it, I think that would be great. And I've said all along here this week that when they've gotten to a knockout stage, I do think that they have an edge because I think, as we all know from watching him over the years, however you feel about Carlisle, he was somebody who was I think a very good in-game adjustment coach and someone that if you give him a chance to focus his energy, he and his staff, on one game against one team and to be able to game plan for that, then I think that's a real edge. So I do fancy Indiana's chances tomorrow night.
Yes, and anything to not see LeBron with fake tears holding up a trophy. Let's just avoid that at all costs.
They would be real tears. It would just be overly dramatic.
Yeah. All right, Mark, we thank you very much. We'll talk to you hopefully next week.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it next week. Take care.
We'll be at
earlier today. Doug Peterson, the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, told reporters that Trevor Lawrence has a high ankle sprain. Is there anything new on this, or is that still where we are? Because I
almost gotta hope it's a cramp.
I feared we had lost him for the season. High ankle sprain suggests that I think Doug Peterson declined to rule out Lawrence for Sunday against the Browns. That seems really far-fetched.
It looked weird Achilles-y to me when I first saw it, but
Boy,
I mean,
it looked shredded knee to me, the way he was bent back like the guy in Platoon.
Oh, yeah.
Gets stepped on and then bent back.
Either way, no bueno.
So he joins the list. Monday Night Football put this up last night. Out for the season, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Kenny Pickett, Anthony Richardson, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson. I wish I had like data of what we deal with every year, but I haven't kept that list.
I think it's really homogenized at this point as far as numbers. Like, we're not going to see a huge variance over, if you add it all up over a 10-year period, it's probably going to be about the same.
Yeah, I think this is about the time every year where we ask about injuries in football and what can be done and all that sort of thing. And I do think player safety is important. I do get pulled offside by the football fan that seems to think we should just not care because it's football and they're entertaining us. And what do you want to put skirts on everybody? So the opposite of putting skirts on everybody is everyone gets carted off the field and we're just supposed to accept it. And I feel like there's a middle ground. There's a reasonable middle ground, but it's so hard to achieve sometimes.
Yeah, it's...
However, you don't want to watch any games with just backup quarterbacks. Nobody does.
No. But you can do something about the hip drop. You can do something about...
Well, a lot of people don't want to do anything about it.
I know, which is really weird. You can do something about, maybe... I mean, they've done a ton about quarterbacks and hitting quarterbacks, but other than that, it's just...
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about injuries in football. There is something you can do about how many.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's I guess that's a reminder because, let's see, none of them, with the exception of like Daniel Jones, is very close to home. And as far as the 49ers, Eagles, Cowboys down the stretch, what we don't really even know how to discuss is the impact of the unknown injury on any given play, partly because, like, how do you even predict that? How do you discuss it? How do you plan for it? But it is catastrophic because I want to say 24 hours ago, as we had one of the TVs on in here in Jacksonville last night, I was kind of thinking, is that an AFC Championship game team? Just based on how out of sorts the Chiefs look. And our other AFC contenders this year were supposed to be the Bengals and the Bills. At least the Bills, I guess, have their guys. So maybe they could save things. But right now in the AFC, you're kind of looking at the Dolphins and Ravens. And the Ravens do make intuitive sense. The Dolphins are going to require some getting used to. Perhaps if they paddle the Cowboys, we'll upgrade them in our heads to a contender. I don't know. But it's just it's really weird to look at the races in the NFL this year, especially on the AFC side, where I think at the start of the year we were saying, well, 7 of the top 10 teams in the league are all in the AFC. What a loaded conference. How's anyone supposed to survive that? And no one survived even getting healthy all the way to the finish line.
And that's why the conversation about the Cowboys, about if they win this weekend and, then they're the top seed in the NFC East. And I know that could change over time, but with tiebreakers and all that. But talking about the 1 seed, man, you have, as a squadron, have struggled against really anybody that's had a pulse. Not a lot of teams have had a pulse that you played. Now, you may look back and say the Rams did, and they got hot after they played you, but they certainly didn't at the time. But to sit there and say that the Cowboys can and will run the table after this, which is what it takes based on the Eagles and Niners schedule, and I just think that you're asking for almost the impossible. Any quarterback you played that has been able to stand back there and throw the football has done damage to you. Stafford's the only one, the only name that didn't have his way, and that pick that he threw to Deron Bland is still one of the most inexplicable throws we've seen.
You think
this year.
You think Jalen was good against them?
Yeah, I mean,
threw for like 180, right?
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I look at them differently. That you're not looking at him to throw for. He controlled the game in the most important parts of the game. I mean, they were down. He came back. They scored on consecutive touchdown drives. I think that
they didn't have 300 yards of offense.
No, they didn't. I just think it's asking a lot to beat Philly, Buffalo, Miami, Detroit.
Yeah.
That's a ton that you're going to have to deal with. A ton. And you're probably going to trip up in one of those games. That's just the law of averages. I'm not saying they can't do it. They obviously can. But all the talk about you win this weekend and yes, we got it. Bro, this is the toughest December schedule in the NFL. It's really hard. We knew it from week 1.
Yeah. No, it is. I guess I don't care about the 1 seed that much because I think the quality of the team, the health of the team, and the way they're playing is far more important, which is not to say 2-2 over the next 4 is good. I think 3-1's got to be the goal. I don't have any delusions of 4-0, nor do I have delusions of the Eagles going on a prolonged losing streak. I think this team can go into Philadelphia and get a win. I don't particularly think this team can go into San Francisco and get a win, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to see the game. Sure. I just don't think there are absolutes. I don't think any
of these.
You're
a month out from knowing more about injuries, so.
Well, yeah, and just the general vibe of the Cowboys is either they get the 1 seed or they don't have a chance. I don't buy it. I don't buy it because we've seen it too many times in the NFL. Now people will say, "Well, I've never seen it from the Cowboys." Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, but. 2 home games versus 3 road games is a much easier path to the Super Bowl.
There's no question that the name of the game should be to try to win your division one of these key years. And
yeah, you go 3 on the road and forget it. I know it's happened. Did Green Bay do it that year? The Giants did it one year.
The first one against the NFC South will be a layup, but.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have to go through
but it's wear and
Philly
tear.
and San Francisco.
It's an extra game.
Yeah.
The team you will play after that will not play that entire weekend. So the slightest injury that you sustain is damage that they won't take on. And again, as we sit here and as I hear other people on the station talking or even us, we definitely are trying to eat an elephant in one bite. And how do you win this many games on the road? How do you win this many playoff games? I think you have to try to turn it into little bites, and you can't say the next 4 weeks you stay on this one. And I don't mean to talk like a football coach, but I really do think this Cowboy team is playing extremely well, and until that changes, I like their chances with any team they play on their schedule. I really do.
Yeah,
but this Sunday,
is the key.
This Sunday is definitely the inflection point.
This is it.
That if they lose,
You're done. In the division.
You're not done.
In the division, you're done.
Yes,
in the division. That's all we're talking about here.
Yeah, if they lose, then it's a matter of trying to get right before the playoffs and then hoping that anything can happen as a wild card. But if you win this weekend, then everything is still in play. And you have proven something for the first time to your fan base that you can beat a quote-unquote contender.
Yeah.
So everything rides on this game this weekend.
It's far and away the most important of the four because if you don't, or four in a row that are really tough. But because if you don't get this, your odds are about at 0 of eclipsing that team, and then you're going to have to go 3 on the road. And that sucks. That's really, really hard. And we've been talking about it for the last 6 weeks, too, just about home and what it means to you. That's why I think they get this one and they get it relatively easy on Sunday. I could be wrong, but I think that they're so good at home and they're so confident at home, and the Eagles are beat up enough to where you're going to end up figuring out a way to put this thing away early fourth quarter.
I'd be shocked if the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I really would.
Yeah,
they're beat up, but they're also not that good this year, as in terms of just all of the underlying metrics. And I realize record's a very important, and it's not underlying at all. It's the one that matters. But if you have watched this team like we have, you just can't convince me they're as good as they were last year. Last year they were killing teams, and they were making it look easy on both sides of the ball. They just don't look like that team. And I think if they get spanked on Sunday, there's a good chance that they're going to start realizing losing consecutive weeks to those teams and being on the ropes even against Buffalo and needing Valdez-Scantling to drop a touchdown against Kansas City. And I think a season could shift like that. So we all realize San Francisco is its own animal right now.
Yeah, this year they are playing the role of the Eagles last year.
Absolutely. And they've earned it, and they've definitely waited their turn, and it's all coming up San Francisco right now. Again, that team is an odd duck because they are very top-heavy, and when they lose a couple guys, they don't look the same. And so what they're hoping is, can we continue to play this mauling physical style and have all of our pieces in order and even home field once we get to the playoffs? And they're digging hard to get that bye week because the bye week builds in some health insurance. And they don't have a ton of depth. They don't have really good offensive line this year. They're trying to do it a different way, and they clearly are pulling it off the way they have absolutely curb-stomped Philadelphia and Dallas. So if San Francisco is whole in January, you would be nuts probably to bet against them. But it's a really fascinating field, and we haven't even said the name Detroit yet, partly because they look a little shaky. That can change. That can change in a hurry. But a lot of us are kind of wondering if Detroit might be a year ahead of schedule. We'll see. It's a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, these next 4 weeks, you couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, I don't know if you'd rather have that stretch over with, like kind of the Eagles do, like the really tough stretch, or, I mean, I guess the answer is yes. You don't want this.
Yeah,
this is great theater for me and for us, right? Like, it's awesome. Every week is a heavyweight fight, but you'd kind of rather have a couple of patsies, but you had 4 in a row.
Well, I heard McCarthy earlier today made the point that it's kind of practice for the playoffs.
That's the thing. I would treat it as such, but I would also fight the urge to confuse it with the playoffs. They are probably going to lose one of these 4 games, and the sun will come out the next day, and they will still have a chance to do what they want to do. That's the only thing, is this be-all, end-all, we must win the division or else. I think you have to accept, to a certain extent, where you are. Just keep winning the next game on your schedule and see where it works out. That Arizona game is extremely damaging, and you don't have a time machine. So you kind of have made your bet already.
Would Jerry, if he had the technology, have already paid for multiple time machines?
I believe so. I believe We would
For his
already
personal use or for team use.
we would already know he has figured out time travel because he would have been back to show us already. I think
that's true.
I don't know. Now my
to-
head hurts.
Maybe to stop himself from having sex with